is focusing on, I will start over. Welcome to Local System Administrator Training. The first portion is covering user IDs. This will touch on various IDs that the career planners that work for you can use to access different information. And as a local system administrator, you are responsible for maintaining who has access to these IDs. Here are some acronyms that we'll be using in the course of this presentation. I will refer to DCEO as for Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. If I refer to OET, that is the DCEO Office of Employment and Training. IWDS is short for the Illinois Workforce Development System. Ibiz or IBIS is short for the Illinois Benefit Information System. IES is the Integrated Eligibility System. IWNC is an Illinois WorkNet Center. SDA is short for Shared Data Agreement. And sometimes I will just say LSA, which is short for a Local System Administrator. So, the first system that obviously an IWDS Local System Administrator is going to be dealing with is IWDS, which is for your local LWIA. You will be responsible for setting up, maintaining, and disabling career planner IDs and access for the IWDS system for your local LWIA. If it's something for LWIA 90, which is the statewide, that ends up coming to the IWDS Local System Administrators, or the system administrators, which right now are me, Chris Tynan, and Jim Potts. Ibiz is the Illinois Benefit Information System. It gets unemployment and job information from IDES, Illinois Department of Employment Security. IES is the Integrated Eligibility System, which is a different way to access the SNAP data from DHS, Department of Human Services. IWDS is a system owned by DCEO. Ibiz, as I mentioned, is Illinois Department of Employment Security. And IES is a joint system between the Illinois Department of Healthcare and Family Services and the Department of Human Services. To obtain access for IWDS or Ibiz, each user has to have a signed IDES Data Sharing Agreement Acknowledgement Form, the Attachment D Shared Data Agreement, on file with OET. This form needs to be filed with the FDA liaison via email before any access rights are granted, either by the IWDS system administrators or the LWIA local system administrators. Used to be Janet Davis. She has retired. She was back on contract to train her replacement, and her contract has ended. Carrie Compardo, and at the end of this PowerPoint, Carrie's contact information is listed as the SDA liaison on the second to last slide. Carrie will now be the SDA point of contact. However, the way that we would like to have it done is that when you're submitting SDA forms, you submit them to Carrie and CC me. That way there, if Carrie's not in the office, at least I can acknowledge that we've received it or forward it on to her or the person who's covering for her duties if she's out of the office for a significant period of time. Local system administrators are not to add new users to IWDS until they submit the IDES Data Sharing Agreement Acknowledgement Form. Once you've submitted it to us, you're free to go ahead and enter the person. If there's a problem with the form, Carrie will contact you to get it corrected if they filled out the wrong thing, if they're missing the signature, if they put the wrong thing in the drop down, whatever. What we don't want is we don't want users being placed into IWDS before the form has been turned in. We've discovered that there are dozens of users that we don't have forms for, that we weren't aware that they were still active users. So we're trying to tighten things down a little bit and get a little bit more organized with these shared data agreements so that IDES is happy with the access of the users and the forms being signed. So the form looks like this, and the individual's full name is to be placed at the top of the form, their job title and work location, and then the employer's name. And that would be, for most of you, it's going to be the LWIA. In some cases, it will be a subcontractor. If that's the case, you list the subcontractor, and what you're looking to do is these two right here would be the normal things that they would always have in there, that it's the employee of an LWIA, Title I grant recipient, and the reason for access to data is Wioa case manager. That's pretty much what we're hoping should cover 99% of the users that you're placing in. The name gets placed here again, printed, sign, date, and then submit as a PDF to DCEO OET. In IWDS, the local system administrator is able to create new IWDS LWIA staff users, as well as new IWDS local system administrators for their LWIA. You are able to grant or remove user roles to these IWDS IDs. You're able to do this either at creation or even after creation. If you have someone who you created as just a giving them basic things for like a resource room attendant, they get promoted and they become a case manager, then they get promoted again and they become a supervisor, they get promoted again and they become a local system administrator. That one ID, you can just continue to add or remove roles as needed as these people work their way through their career with your organization. Now, if they leave your LWIA to go to another one, then you would want to disable them and it would become the responsibility of the next person in the other LWIA. If someone does not log into the system, or if they leave and come back, the IWDS system can have those users be disabled. As a local system administrator, you're able to re-enable the IWDS LWIA users in your LWIA, either for taking care of the long-term inactivity or somebody left for a couple of weeks and then came back. You don't necessarily have to give them a new ID if they haven't been gone very long. If you have users that have forgotten their passwords, you will be able to reset the passwords for the users in your LWIA. And when people leave your employment, you will be able to disable the IWDS users who are no longer employed by your LWIA. Creating a new user. Now, first, obviously, we already discussed that the SDA form has been turned in. So then you go in, and this is the information that you would use to create the new user. The screen is going to ask you for the first name, the last name, their work phone number, their work email address, and then the LWIA is going to be automatically filled by the system based on what LWIA you're assigned to as the local system administrator. The Illinois WorkNet dropdown is going to be populated with the different locations that are in IWDS that are associated with your LWIA. The dropdown is going to look similar to this, and it's got some different organizations here that generally you guys aren't going to mess with in the field. These are things that I would be setting up for people coming in that are going to be auditors or wanting to take a look at different things for monitoring. You guys are usually going to be looking down here at the bottom, where the very last choice in the drop down is always going to be the one associated with your LWIA. In this case, LWIA 15, City of Peoria Workforce Development Department. So at this point, we created sample user, put the phone number in, put the email in, chose the basic place at Career Link Peoria County, non-veteran staff. Matter of fact, in 12 years, I've never seen where anybody needed to be marked anything other than non-veteran staff. Must be a holdover from the last system. The username is auto-generated by the system when you click save. So in this case, it takes the first initial and the last name. Now, if somebody was already out there, say someone named Sarah user or Stephanie user or Steven user, then it would do S user 1 or S user 2 or S user 3. The system will make sure that the username is unique. When you're creating the user, these are the roles that you'll be able to pick from. There's really no set, this is what a career planner should have, or this is what this type of person should have. It's kind of a mix and match of what works at your LWIA and what things you want them to have access to. Each of these roles allows users to access features in IWDS. There are roles that are view only. There's roles that have data entry, roles that give access to run reports, a supervisor role, as well as the local system administrator role. For example, if you want this person to be able to see grant information, then grant reports is probably something you're going to want to, or LWIA grants, LWA grants view only, LWA grant planner. Those are things that that person would probably need. If the person is not going to be working with grants, then those are roles that you probably don't need to give them because it would just be extra data that could confuse them. I'm going to see what this chat item is. Okay. Kirsten, looks like the wrong PowerPoint got placed in the chat box. That's the one for tomorrow on entities and relationships. This is the one on user IDs, and the other one today will be on editing IWDS systems. Okay. So as I said, you can mix and match, give the roles that you think that the person needs at this time for their job. Turns out you need to give them something else, you just log in, go into their ID and add it. If they've got something that you don't want them to be able to mess with anymore, or you don't want them looking at a particular report, take it away. It's pretty fluid. It can change from day to day. You can temporarily grant somebody access to something for a project, and when the project is over, just remove that role from their ID. Select the roles based on the user's position at the LWIA, such as whether they're a career planner, grant manager, supervisor. Once you're done selecting the roles that you think are necessary, in this case right here, this person, for me, is a sample career planner. They're taking a look at participant reports, summary reports. They're going to be able to do Wioa Youth 5% and not 5%, with other Wioa career planner items. They can put a person in trade, performance management reports, obligation approval, case management view only, which then These other items get added on top of that, so it kind of creates the ability to look at a client, LWA staff, as well as participant period reports. Now, you could, if you guys in your toolbox have other items that you think are normal everyday parts of what your career planners do, those are then that's your cheat box. You know, you can make a list, you could have something set aside where this is what we give our career planners. Or you can use another person as a template. I want this person to have the exact same rights as Bob Smith. So you look up Bob Smith, see what his rights and roles are, and then when you create the new person, you give them the same exact rights and roles that that other user had. It's just all what is, however you guys want to do it is your best practice. Now, as I said earlier, IWDS will generate a pop-up message at the top of the screen when you click Save. It creates the username. In this case, it was suser, sample user, and it creates the very first temporary password. As I mentioned earlier, if there's already someone with suser, the system will turn around and auto increment 1, 2, so on. This will also create an Illinois WorkNet ID and password for the user in this box, which is why I recommend when you create a brand new user, screenshot, screen capture, snip, whatever program you guys use to make screen captures. I take a screen capture just like this, and I paste it in the email that I'm sending to the person for their sign-in, for their initial access. Because then they've got the user ID, the password, and they have the Illinois WorkNet stuff saved in an email in case they need to go over there and get signed in. User management. Now, occasionally, users will turn around and, for whatever reason, maybe their job doesn't require it, maybe they were on vacation, maybe they were sick, for whatever reason, if something happens where a user does not log into IWDS within 35 days, then on the 35th day, that evening, overnight, the IWDS system will disable them. And it's an auto-generated thing where it takes the user, changes them from enabled Y to enabled N. And when you first look at like if they say they can't log into IWDS or they try to do the forgot password and it didn't work, this is probably why. They probably are enabled equals no. This is an easy fix for you as a local system administrator and something you will do quite often. So what happens here is you click View, and to re-enable the user, you go in here, you change enabled no to yes, and you change the disabled reason, which if it is a system generated disabled, then it will automatically put long-term inactivity. You just change it from whatever the reason is back to the top, which is the blank line. The very first piece of the drop down is a blank line. So you change it to enabled equals yes, disabled reason equals blank, and then you click save. If the person needs to be re-enabled and have their password reset, treat it as two separate tasks. If you try to do both at the same time, let's say you do this, you go ahead and re-enable the person, and then you go up here and you click reset password. What'll happen is it'll give you a reset password, but it does not save the enabled change. It will still have the person as enabled equals no, and you'll be sending them a new password for an ID they still can't access. You have to enable the user first, save it, then go back in and do the password reset. Now, when you re-enable a user, they have to log in the same day that you've re-enabled them. Otherwise, if they still haven't logged in, and it's been over 35 days in the IWDS system, then tonight it's going to disable their ID again. So if they don't get logged in today, then you're going to end up having to re-enable them again tomorrow. This is not something that they can sit on. They need to get right on it, get logged in, and let you know, hey, I was able to get in. Thank you. Now, for resetting the password, once again, like I said, you go to the thing, you click View, you get in here. There's a big button right at the very top, Reset Password. When you click it, it creates a pop-up message that you're going to want to, I screen share or I turn around and I will copy the whole message and paste it in an email. It's always going to be a system-generated numeric password. And it's always going to be 7 numbers. So if they mess up, you just come in here, click Reset Password again. Here's the thing though, on IWDS from the login page, there's a button that says Forgot Password. As long as they are enabled equals yes, and you have the correct email address in their ID, they should be able to click Forgot Password and have the system do this for them. If something's happening where they're not getting the system generated email, resetting their password for them, chances are there's something wrong with the email that's been entered in the user ID. As a local system administrator, you can look at your users and see the last day that they actually logged into IWDS. So up here at the very top, right next to username, it says last login. If you see something like this where it says 1/1/1900, that means the person's never used their ID. They've never logged into IWDS at all. Now, in some cases, you're going to have, especially on the people that you're re-enabling, the ones that have been system disabled for over 35 days, it'll tell you the last time they actually logged in. It might be that the person is right on the 35 days. It could be they haven't logged in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, but it's going to tell you the last day they logged in. Now, also as a local system administrator who's probably a supervisor of a lot of these case managers, this is a way that you can actually look to see, how often some of your employees are actually getting into IWDS to do the work, do the follow-up, do the enter services, enter case notes. If you've got a person who hasn't logged in a couple of weeks, you know that they haven't been in IWDS doing those things. Disabling a user, usually this will be because the person left employment. In my 12 years, we have actually had one instance where we needed to have a user disabled due to system misuse. They were looking up people they knew, and they got caught. So they lost access to all state systems. Their access was removed from WorkNet, IWDS, Ibiz, Snap, everything. And there's a note in all of those systems saying that this person's never to get access again. So with new users, make sure they understand that, this is not a library. This isn't something that they can get in here and browse around. If you want to give them some sample users from your OEA to go look at so they can get used to what they're doing, that's great. But we don't want them looking up family members. We don't want them looking up neighbors. We don't want them looking up people they know. That's something that I just strongly recommend that somewhere along the line you make sure they understand that's not a good idea. Now, this person left, got another job, retired, whichever. So when they go to leave, you're going to come in here and you're going to change the enabled to no. You're going to select the disabled reason from the drop down. If they have left the employment and it's not for system misuse, then the answer is going to be no longer employed by partner. We don't care if they retired. We don't care if you fired them. We don't care if they quit. just they're no longer employed by partner. Now, there are other options to disable a user, and if one of those is the appropriate reason, use that. But 99% of the time, it's going to be no longer employed by partner. Now, this IWDS is a reporting legacy system. We store user data in relation to the client data. So these users, the case managers, are tied to their clients and the data they entered, the case notes, the services, the other things. So we don't want to delete users because the actions they took are still recorded in the client data. So all we're going to do is disable them. Now, as I said earlier, if you got somebody who left and decided they didn't like the new thing, or they ended up not moving, or whatever it was, and you're going to rehire them, if it hasn't been very long, I would just re-enable the old ID. Now, if it's a case of where the person's been gone, they've been gone 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, I would create a new ID for that person, because the legacy system, this way we know there's a break of employment. It's just cleaner if we're looking up historical data on that user and their clients. Also, what happens is if this person goes in the IWDS system, when we look at the IWDS screens later today, under their clients, they have all the clients listed that were registrants, exiters, etc., that were associated with this client ID. When they come back, they're probably not going to have those clients anymore. They'll have been given to someone else. So it's best to just make a clean break and have a new ID. Now, when local system administrators are the only people at the LWIA who have the authorization to make user access or removal requests to OET for Ibiz, IES, or IWDS systems. So if a case manager, John Doe, contacts me at IWDS wanting to get access to Ibiz for himself, my response is going to be to tell him to go to his local system administrator for the LWIA, and that I can't grant access until they approve. Same goes with if that person contacts me wanting me to reset their IWDS password. The IWDS system administrators are not going to reset passwords or re-enable LWIA staff that the local system administrator is able to handle, because we're not in your office. We don't know the way I always explain it is, we don't know who's hired, fired, on suspension, under observation, on medical leave, vacation. We don't know any of that. So we have no idea what their employment status is. We're relying on the local system administrators to be that level of security between the state system, us, and the end users, which are your career planners. So you guys are the security for us. So emails are to be sent with the necessary forms to the appropriate OET staff when we are making any kind of changes to LWIA users, whether it be Ibiz, IES, IWDS, any of that. Everything's going to come through the local system administrators for the LWIA. Now, in IWDS, we have your local LWIA, but we also have one over-encompassing LWIA called LWIA 90, which is the statewide grant. Some of the LWIAs are routinely in there with staff that have active user or active clients even right now. Some LWIAs don't really need to use LWIA 90 and don't need to use the statewide grants. They're completely satisfied by using the local ones. But if you do use the statewide grant system, access is requested through the IWDS system administrators, which are Chris Tynan, me, or Jim Potts. Requests are to be submitted from combination one way or the other. Either it comes from the OET, DCEO OET grant manager with a CC with the local system administrator for the local OEA, or it's the local system administrator for the local OEA sending the email with the grant manager CC'd on it. Either way is fine. We just need to know who the grant manager is for the statewide grant, as well as one of the local system administrators for the OEA on the email for us to create the ID. All IWDS OEA 90 users have to have one of those IDES data sharing agreement acknowledgement forms on file before we will create the OEA 90 ID, just like a regular IWDS local OEA ID. The local system administrator should contact the IWDS system administrators at OET for any IWDS OEA 90 user password resets, or for us to disable the OEA 90 user. If the statewide grant is over and you guys no longer need the statewide OEA 90 ID, you could tell us to go ahead and disable it. You know, we could disable it, make it enabled equals no, no longer needed. But we definitely need to remove it when the person leaves employment. We need to make sure that the IWDS system administrators are notified if that person leaves employment, and we'll cover that on one of the PDFs that I made coming up here in just a second. So any corrections to OEA 90 client applications has to be submitted to the IWDS system administrators at OET. I probably should stress that we can do it over the phone, but we like to have documentation. We prefer some kind of email so that we have a paper trail that this was requested by the local system administrator for the correction to be made to the OEA 90 client. Any assistance with exits or performance on OEA 90 clients, the local system administrator needs to submit to the Wioa performance measures staff at OET, which is Mark Burgess and Paula Berry, and CC the IWDS system administrators, which are me and Jim, because sometimes emails fall through the cracks. This way, if Jim or I see that there's an email still in our inbox that we don't see a response to, we might give a nudge to Paula or Mark and ask if this has been taken care of. When OEA 90 users are no longer employed by the OEA or no longer need the OEA 90 access, email the IWDS system administrators and the SDA liaison to inform them of the change so that we can disable the OEA 90 ID. Now, I'm going to pull up a different document here for a second that I want to share. See if I can find it. And this is something that I put out let's see. Now, this new or deactivating IWDS, IES, Ibiz, EBS, this is a PDF which I sent out to the local system administrator list. And I've done this a few times. And this is the current version of it. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I'm sharing this. This PDF should be available as part of today's training. It just breaks down that, like, when we're dealing with new users, This is the standard. If you have a new IWDS ID, you have to do the shared data acknowledgement form and send it to these people. You'll send it to me, and you'll CC Patty, who is the manager for the OET. And if it's an Wioa 90 ID, send it to Jim Potts and Chris Tylen. If it's a new IES user, you send those to me, and I forward it to Carrie Compardo, who's the new, taken over for Janet Davis. If it's an Ibiz request form, it comes to me. And then all these can be done as long as you put all the different recipients on the one email. You could do all of it as one email if you want. And then when we come down here to deactivating users, it also says who these things go to. Once again, you're able, if you want to turn an email in and you cover by putting me, Patty, and Jim, and info at Illinois WorkNet on one email, and you list all the reasons, and you put the user's name and email address in the body of the email so that they can look up for Illinois WorkNet access, you could do one email to all necessary recipients to deactivate everything at once. As I said before, this is a PDF that I put together that will be available as part of the downloads from today's training. This is just a quick reference sheet that when you have a new user, do this. When you're disabling a user, do that. And Kirsten put the PDF in the chat. If you guys don't have a copy of that, then you can grab a copy of that now. I'm going to go ahead and swap back to the training. And we're going to go on with Ibiz. Ibiz, Illinois Benefit System. It's a program that's owned by IWDS, the Illinois Department of Employment Security. It contains unemployment benefit information. Accessing the Ibiz system requires two user IDs, a PKI digital ID and a RACF ID. Requests to add, remove, or reset passwords for the Ibiz users have to be submitted to me by LWIA local system administrators. I do not grant access, remove access, or reset a password for staff. It has to come from a local system administrator. Once again, like I said, I don't know who's hired, fired, suspended, on vacation. I'm not in your office. I don't know. Ibiz access is requested by the local system administrator by submitting a Bureau of Agency Services ITM External User ID request form. The user also has to have an IWDS data sharing agreement acknowledgement form on file before the Ibiz access will be granted. Same form that we did for granting access to IWDS, it also covers getting access to Ibiz. All these forms can be submitted at the same time, but please do them in separate PDFs. Sometimes it's easy to break the PDF apart and get the one piece I need out and then send the piece on to Carrie that she needs. Sometimes I can't. It just all depends on the type of PDF. Changes to user information name. If the person gets married, divorced, changes work address, changes work email, changes the work phone number, you'll contact me and let me know what these changes are, and I'll fill out a change request form and have to submit that to the RACF security group. Office of Employment and Training is only authorized to process Ibiz access for LWIA employees using the system for Wioa activities. If you have somebody who's wanting to gain access for something other than Wioa that's not that's not a case manager, not somebody working with Wioa grants, not working with clients, I'm not your person. They can get access, it just won't be through me. I am only authorized to process Ibiz access for people using the system for Wioa, or in some cases trade, TAA, client access. Now, also, when it comes to resets, same thing. If they're wanting a RACF reset for GRS or any of the other systems that RACF can get them into, I'm not your guy. I'm only authorized to make those changes, reset passwords, grant remove access for Wioa. Nothing else. So once OET receives the completed signed form and verifies the user has the SDA on file, OET will submit to the RACF security group to have a RACF ID created. I only submit to the RACF security group once a week. She wanted me to only go once a month, and I said, no, that's not going to work. So what we're doing is whatever the end of the week is, if there's a holiday on Friday, then the end of the week is Thursday. If it's Thanksgiving week and we have Thursday and Friday off, then the end of the week is Wednesday. Most weeks are going to be Friday. If, God willing, I actually take a vacation, then no one's going to do it that week. It's just me. There really isn't a backup unless I'm going to be out for a significant period of time. I do have the information to where somebody can step in if I'm going to be out for an extended period. But if it's just I'm sick on Friday, then I will do the submissions on Monday. Generally, we're looking at a process of 1 to 2 weeks from date of submission. So if you give me a new user access form on Monday the 1st, I will turn it in on Friday the 5th. And 90% of the time, you're going to have that user back on Friday the 10th with a new ID and password. However, it could take until Friday the 15th. This depends on the RACF security group and the Ibiz security group, who has to assign Ibiz access to the newly created RACF ID. So there are 2 security groups that have to do their job before the ID gets back to me to return it to you to give to your user. Generally, 1 week, could take as long as 2. But submissions are on Friday afternoon, so anything that I receive by noon on Friday will go out that afternoon. Sometimes even things that come in as late as 4 o'clock on Friday, I still get it added in. I prefer that if at all possible, please have them to me prior to noon on Friday if you want them to go in on that week's submission. That also goes for removing access. It's a similar process, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, on this form, everything highlighted here is a required item that I have to have filled in before I can submit the form. Under the type of request, we're looking at either a new ID, a delete ID, or a change ID. I've automated the process for doing the delete and the change, so you guys will never have to fill out those forms. I will do them through my database. I just need you to do this for new users. So a new ID, which means that you don't have to put their existing RACF, because the delete and the change I'll take care of. The person's name has to be printed clearly, their work phone number, work address, city, state, zip. This is one that gets missed a lot. I need the OWIA number. Then I need their work email. Then down here, this section here where it says requesting access to IMS TSO host system application, all you need to do is just click here. This box, just mark the first box for inquiry. We're not going to grant someone update access through RACF. It's always going to be inquiry. So if you just check this box right here, that's perfect. Where this says digital certificate ID, this is not, and I repeat, not their IWDS ID. This is a PKI digital ID that they will create themselves while using their driver's license. We'll talk about that in a minute. So when the person puts the thing on here, if they put exactly what their IWDS ID is, ask them whether or not they used their driver's license when they got the ID, because 9 times out of 10, they didn't understand and they just put their IWDS ID on that line on the paper they gave you. And then when I go to process it, it's not going to work because they don't have a PKI digital ID attached to the RACF. Next thing that has to be done is they have to sign it, they have to date it. Once this is done, if it's not I have some forms that they're able to do electronically, or if you just have them do a paper form, scan, make a PDF of it, send it to me. So, as I said here, this field digital certificate ID, they're going to have to go to the DOIT, Department of Innovation and Technology website, and create a unique ID that they choose themselves. Now, this is the first part of this. There is a PDF, which most of you should have. If not, it's one of the items that I gave to Kirsten to go ahead and make available today, where it's PKI digital ID info. It's got this link, which takes you to the DOIT website for digital ID registration and recovery. If you are having problems with this, see the red portion here. I can't help you. You have to contact the help desk at one of the 2 numbers, either the Springfield number or the Chicago number. And this information, last time I went through the automated system, this was still correct. Option 1 was still computer related. Option 2 is digital ID support. And then you say, when the thing comes on, was this concerning? This is concerning a PKI digital ID. If the person does not have an Illinois driver's license, they're probably going to have to call this phone number for assistance in setting up this ID. For example, those of you who live on the borders, you may have someone that lives in Wisconsin that's coming down and working in Wioa. You could have somebody over across the Indiana border that's coming over and working in Danville. You could have somebody from Hannibal that's coming over and working in Quincy, etc. If they do not have an Illinois driver's license, this automated system to create an ID will not work for them. They're gonna have to call one of these 2 numbers and get somebody to help them make it. If the Ibiz user needs a password reset, or if they get an error message that the RACF ID is revoked or suspended, that's when you email the RACF ID and the username to the Ibiz coordinator, who right now it's me. And the first thing I do is I verify that the user is using the correct RACF ID. You would be amazed how many times I get Jane Doe and she's trying to log in with MHD4455, and it turns out that that's not her ID, and her actual ID is MHD4545. That's the reason why I want you to put the RACF ID and the person's name that's requesting the reset in the email to me. First thing I check, make sure they're using the right ID with the right name, and then I forward that to the RACF security group for a reset. What's not in here at the moment is that our current RACF security and personnel, the main guy works a 4-day work week, Tuesday to Friday. So if you make a password reset request on Monday, 95% of the time, the backup guy is too busy to get to those. They do have other staff that work on Monday, but they've got their own work and their own things. Unless it's an emergency, chances are I'm not going to see that password request until that password reset request come back until Tuesday morning. So when you request one of these, I would say expectations are that you should get your password reset request back within 1 to 2 business days. Generally, you're going to get it same day, maybe even same hour. but it could take as long as 1 to 2 days, depending on what's going on. We had an issue earlier this year where the RACF security guy got sick. He missed an entire week and a half of work, and I had 57 password request resets in that week that he was gone, and I kept track of what I had, and I ended up having to get the supervisor to get the backup person to go in, and I ended up having to make a spreadsheet list of all of the reset requests for them to just go through and do and get back to me. So I do keep meticulous details. I know which ones I've submitted. Occasionally one will slip through the cracks. I'm not perfect. You know, just like occasionally, sometimes you guys may think you sent it to me and you didn't. You know, it happens. I will always take your requests for access and try to get them submitted as quickly as possible and get them back to you as quickly as possible. If there's an issue, I will let you know. So anyway, once again, disclaimer, I'm only authorized to process these RACF password resets for users that are in the Oet Ibiz user database list that I keep maintained. And I do this through occasionally every 6 to 7 months, I'll send the local system administrators to the Wioa list of who currently has access to make sure we've got the right people on there and I don't need to remove someone. Now, if someone is asking for a password reset to get into another state of Illinois program, GRS, SNAP, something else, I can't help you. I literally cannot. I am very limited in scope, and it has to be one of my users, and it has to be for Wioa purposes. And then when we get the temporary password back, it's only good for 2 business days. So like if we get it back on Friday, it's not going to expire by Sunday. It will be good until Tuesday. So it's good for 2 business days, 48 hours. If your person, if you can make a password request to me on Monday, I get it back to you Monday afternoon, and they don't try to use it until Friday, yeah, it's not going to work. So I recommend that if, you know, just have your users kind of trained that if you give them a password reset, you expect them to use it right away. Now, if they get a user message that their RACF ID is expired, that's good. That means that they can change the password themselves without a reset. Expired is normal. That's something that's going to happen somewhere between 30 and 34 days. I've been told 30, I've been told 31, I've been told 33. I don't think anybody knows because it's an old mainframe system that goes back to the 80s and those guys are long gone. All we know is it's somewhere between 30 and 34 days. When you go to log in, it will say password expired. Ibiz users are able to change their password anytime they want to by using the same link that you're going to use when you're given a temporary password. You are not able to change your password from the Ibiz website. You're going to have to do it from this link. So just get the users used to the idea that they're going to have to go to a separate URL. They can't change the password from the Ibiz page. They're going to have to click this link that's on in the reset blurb, or you know, this is something that should be available on I've got a PDF on how to reset your RACF password that I send out quite often. Just make sure that they're following the instructions. They need to actually read the instructions and follow them. Now, when they go to do this, what's going to happen is this. They're going to get taken to something that comes up, this change MVS password. Their MVS user ID, the old password, the new password, and retype the new password. Your MVS user ID is your RACF. You have to type in MHD, X, you know, whatever the 4 numbers are. MDH will not work. It doesn't matter if it's uppercase or lowercase, but it has to be MHD and your 4-digit ID. The old password, if you are just doing this yourself and it comes from where it expired, then it's the password you just tried. It's your normal password. It's going to be your old password now because you're making a new one. Now, if you had a password reset done and you were given a temporary password, then your old password is going to be the temporary password you were just given. Your new password has to meet the following requirements. Your password must be exactly 8 characters. The password has to have at least one letter. It doesn't matter if it's capital or lowercase, it's not case sensitive. The password has to have at least one number, 0 through 9. The password has to have one of the 3 special characters depicted here. These only. # or hashtag for you younger people, the $, or the @ sign. Note, when you make the password, it cannot begin with the special character. Now they've got some logic in here. The password cannot be your first or last name. Matter of fact, we've had some issues where people have tried to use their children's names and it's rejected them because it recognizes it as a name. Your password cannot use abbreviations or names of the month, like June, July, Jan, Feb, Sep. It recognizes that too. Password must not have been used in the previous 12 months. Most of you have probably seen some of these Far Side cartoons or other things where the person keeps typing and typing and typing and typing, and they finally get a password that they think they can't possibly have matched, and it says you can't use last month's password. This is the kind of stuff it's looking for. I recommend you find a word that is 5 or 6 letters long. Use one of the special characters and 1 or 2 numbers. So for example, some of the LWIAs out there, you guys, you'll laugh because you know that I refer to, okay, we have our turtles and we have our flowers. These are users that for whatever reason just can never reset their password and you guys have to do it for them. We joke that now we've got flower #1, flower $2, coffee is another 6-letter word that would work. Plants, 5 letters. If they want to increment numbers up past single digit. This is going to be, all this information is on the password reset email that I send out every time you request a password reset for Ibiz. It's just a question of whether or not your users are actually reading it. Just make sure that you understand so that you can explain to your user, hey, what did you try for a password? Well, exclamation point's not an accepted character. You need to use pound sign, $, @. Well, there's no number in that password you just told me. What you've got to have a letter, a number, and a special character. These are things that newer Ibiz users that aren't in a rhythm and haven't gotten used to this, these are mistakes they're going to make. Deactivating an Ibiz user. This is important because IWDS is extremely secure about making sure that only people who are supposed to have access to Ibiz have access. If someone leaves your agency, you need to email the Ibiz coordinator, me, at OET, within a day or 2. The Ibiz coordinator, me, I will create the deactivation request form, and I will get it turned in once per week on Friday. However, generally, if I get a request saying that this person is no longer employed, especially if it's somebody that you let go for system misuse that was getting in there and looking at people they shouldn't have been, I can make a password reset request let's say the person leaves on, you fire them on Monday, and you're worried about their Ibiz access. You email me. I will email the RACF security group and say, hey, I need you guys to do a password reset on this ID so that they can no longer log in. So I will get the password reset. I won't send the reset information back out. It's just no one will be able to get into that. And then on Friday, I'll submit the form that I auto-generate. And generally on Monday or Tuesday, their access will be removed. But if it's somebody that we're worried about them getting into the system, that you think they're still gonna try, or it's, you know, somebody that you let go because they were misusing the system, let me know and I will get that ID the password reset to where that person can't get in. And then you have peace of mind and you know they're not getting in there and messing around. So if an OEA employee leaves your employment, you must notify the IWDS coordinator and the SDA liaison as soon as possible. Notifying me is enough, and I will let Carrie know. I will forward on to her and tell her that that person is no longer employed. The reason why, like I said, is that it could be a violation of the data sharing agreement if it turns out that the person does go into Ibiz and start looking up people that they're not supposed to be looking at. IES. Now, I'm going to say the disclaimer here up front just so that you guys all kind of understand. I don't get into IES because I don't have a reason to be in there. I'm not a case manager, so legally I have no reason to be looking at the SNAP data, so I don't look at it. I don't even have an IES ID. All of this is done through Carrie Compardo now. It used to be Janet Davis. Before that, it was Levi Bureau. The person who is the FDA coordinator also gets the wonderful job of being the IES gatekeeper, similar to the way that I am the IBIZ gatekeeper. So the Integrated Eligibility System is a computer-based public benefits application management system. It's a joint initiative between HFS, Department of Healthcare and Family Services, and DHS, the Department of Human Services, where the users are able to view client eligibility information. They're able to see all benefits, medical, SNAP, TANF, for at least the last 12 months, earned and unearned income used to determine benefit eligibility, client notices, read dates, which I'm not sure what that is, but I'm sure those of you that use the system do, family members included in the case as well. IES access is granted to the OEAs as a subcontractor to OET through the shared data agreement between BCEO and DHS. If you have any questions regarding whether or not your agency or OEA has access to the IES system, contact the SDA liaison. As I said earlier, that is now Carrie Compardo. Her phone and email information is on the second to last slide on this presentation. Gaining access. IES access is requested by the local system administrators to the OET SDA liaison. Each staff person from your agency who requests access to IES will need to have a signed IDES data sharing agreement acknowledgement form on file with OET. Same form you got to have for IBIZ and IWDS. You will complete a systems access request Il4442022 Form. That is the IES form. You will review the HIPAA and privacy training policy for externals and the external security awareness training. You will complete and sign the IES HIPAA privacy policy training attestation and the IES certificate of understanding. Both forms are to be signed by the user's supervisor, which is the local system administrator for the OEA. You will then obtain an external ID, a username and password, and then you will submit all the forms to the SDA liaison. Here is what the Il4442022 form looks like. The highlighted information must be completed. That will be the user information of first name, last name, work address, work email, work telephone, IDHS ID if already assigned to the person, what user systems you're requesting to access, which would be IES, and then if there's something else that's already verified with the ID, if you already had an ID, then you need to mark the other system you got access to. Then down here at the bottom, you're going to complete the printed name, user signature, and then DCEO signs the community provider approval. So this down here is signed by the SDA liaison. Creating the external ID. Each staff person from your agency requiring access to IES will need to obtain an external ID at the Do It Identity Management website. This is a self-service account management system allowing users to create an Illinois.gov ID and or reset their account password. The user will use the external ID and the password to log into IES. This is different than the PKI digital ID. So then you come in here, you click the link, you go to this page. The information you enter must match your driver's license exactly. If the information is not entered exactly as it appears in your driver's license, it can cause your registration to fail. Employees that do not have an Illinois driver's license are not eligible to register via this automated system, just like the PKI digital ID. So you will need to notify your agency lead, who will then notify their HFS or DHS liaison. And then an enterprise service request will have to be created manually to get an ID for a person who does not have an Illinois driver's license. Do It requires an email address verification and will send a confirmation email when completed. So if you don't put in your actual work email, then you won't get the confirmation email to click to verify. Once you click the link in the email you receive, you'll be returned to the Do It website to complete the self-registration form. Updating user information for IES. If something changes, name, work address, work email, work phone, then the local system administrator must submit a new form, completely new form, Il4442022, and forward it to the FDA liaison, notifying them that, hey, I'm now submitting Jane Smith because Jane Doe got married and her name is now Jane Smith. If the user email changes, then they'll have to create a new external ID, previous two slides, and then submit a new user access form to become active in IES with your new email. Because of multi-factor authentication, it's very important that your IES account has an accurate work email. So if the person gets married or divorced and the last name changes, you're going to have to do this all over again. If you have a password user reset, users are required to change their passwords in IES every 60 days. If the user fails to change their password and doesn't log in, and it's day 61, then they will be locked out of IES until they come in and make the change. Additionally, users who are inactive for 60 days will automatically have their account changed to inactive. If the user account becomes inactive, then the local system administrator will need to resubmit a brand new form, the Il4442022, for the user to the SDA liaison to reactivate their ID again. So if you have people who are in IES, I would just recommend that they get in the habit of logging in at least once a month. Everybody log in on the first just to make sure your ID is working, kind of thing, because otherwise you're going to be filling this form out a lot. And going back, I see that there is a question that we probably should have covered a little bit ago. I think I mentioned this. We don't want to remove IWDS users completely. We have legacy systems that tie each of these users to client history data. So it's just going to be there. It's the way the system was designed. It's designed to be a legacy system where it ties who did what, who created what case note, service note, who created this particular client account, etc. Okay, to gain access to IES, the user enters the username, including the domain the user was given when the user obtained the external ID through DoIT. Example, mary.smith@external.illinois.gov. The user will also receive a system-generated notification when the user's name was added to IES. The username from DoIT should match the user information, user ID in the notification. If the names don't match, this will cause an error and prevent the user from logging into IES. Notify the SDA liaison to correct this problem. Deactivating IES users. Anytime a user leaves the agency, the local system administrator must complete and submit another user access Il4442022 Form to delete access to the and turn it into the SDA liaison in order to stay compliant with the DCEO-DHS Shared Data Agreement. Possible system misuse. If for any reason you suspect that one of your employees or a subcontractor is misusing their access to any of these systems, IWDS, the LWN 90, IWDS, statewide grants area, Ibiz, IES, contact the IWDS system administrators at DCEO immediately. That's Chris Tylen and Jim Potts. Misuse includes accessing systems for outside employment or basically non-Wioa related information. This person is, just an example. They have a night and weekend job as a realtor, and they use the system to look up to see specific names of people who were laid off by a trade event in the area because they're going to go see if those people need to sell their house. That's system misuse. Looking up the neighbor to see what their employment data shows on Ibiz, like how much they're making a year, where they're employed, what they do. That's system misuse. Looking to see whether or not a person was in IWDS getting training or, trying to get, help to get a better job because they were underemployed. That's system misuse. Using the system to look up family members, coworkers, celebrities, all system misuse. Just make sure that as part of your onboarding, when you're bringing in a new user, that they understand that this is not acceptable. And here is the Oet Contact List. This is current as of today. IWDS system administrators include Jim Potts and Chris Tylen. Here's our desk numbers and our emails. Right now, I would recommend email us because with us having to work remotely, right now there is an issue at our building with the elevators. We're on the 10th floor, and our boss is gracious enough to tell us that we don't have to walk those 10 flights of stairs every day. I am the Ibiz coordinator. There's my phone number and email again. Wioa Performance Measure staff. This is the when you get issues with the performance or how things are getting reported, etc. Mark Burgess and Paula Berry. The SDA liaison, as well as the IES access. Carrie Compardo is now the new person who is over those areas. Janet Davis, as I said, is retired and her contract is over. So now on, those emails will go to Carrie with a CC to me, or they can go to me and then I'll forward them to Carrie. Are there any questions related to this section about user IDs? And I don't see anything coming up in the chat. So what we are going to do is we are going to take a 10-minute break. We will come back at 2:40, and we will pick up with the second half of today, which is the editing IWDS screens, client screens. Like I said earlier, for those of you who are experienced IWDS local system administrators, this will be definitely more of a review for you. For those of you who are new or who haven't been active in working with client screens, this will be very informative to you about the things that you'll be able to change yourself and what will need to be submitted for monitoring or system administrator correction. And with that, I am going to mute my phone, and I will be back at 2:40. All right, if everyone is ready, we will go ahead and get started. This is the second half of the August 3rd, 2022 Local System Administrator training. This is the second PowerPoint covering editing IWDS client screens. We'll be talking about what fields that a person with a local system administrator role in IWDS is able to make changes to that another role, such as career planner or local system or the case manager supervisor, may not necessarily be able to change, but the local system administrator can. In the background, you may hear some thunder and lightning. In the last 10 minutes, a decent-sized storm has rolled over my house and sent one of the dogs scurrying to the crate looking for somewhere to hide. So, acronyms that will be used in this presentation. DCEO is short for Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. OET is the DCEO Office of Employment and Training. IWDS is short for the Illinois Workforce Development System. IWNC is short for the Illinois WorkNet Center. And LSA, it can be short for a local system administrator. Overview. For those of you who are new to IWDS completely, this training is not meant to be a substitute for the Wioa training series offered by OET by Jim Potts. This training is simply about what a local system administrator can change or edit on a client screen after a client has been certified or before, as well as how to submit for client modifications that will need assistance from Office of Employment and Training, whether it be through the monitoring staff or directly to the IWDS system administrators. So this is not meant to replace the Wioa training that is offered by Jim Potts. Also, please be aware that just because something can be changed doesn't always mean that it should be changed. The local system administrator needs to be aware of how those changes can affect client eligibility before making any alterations or submitting for modification, such as if you're changing a test score or an income or whether somebody was on Social Security disability. Answers like those can change whether somebody is actually eligible for the Wioa title, whether they are eligible under low income, or whether they're eligible under basic skills deficient. Eligibility is something that you need to keep in mind when making any changes to a client screen. So, basic IWDS explanation. IWDS has two distinct levels of data entry for a client. The customer level is where the most up-to-date information is stored. If a new application is added to an existing client, then the customer information from the newest application will overwrite the existing customer level data. So think of it this way. You've got a door, and on the door you have Ruth Aaron's name. Behind the door, you have multiple rooms that are the different times that Ruth Aaron has come in and had an application. So you open the main door to get inside, and now you have a hallway full of doors, and each one of these doors is an individual application. The newest application that has the most recent up-to-date information is the information that's going to be displayed on that front door, on that customer level. So, for example, if Ruth came in as Ruth Smith, then that application's still in there. And then she got married and became Ruth George. And then she was served on Ruth George. Then she got divorced. And then she got remarried as Ruth Aaron and had another application as Ruth Aaron. That's why when you look up Ruth, the most recent information will have her name as Ruth Aaron, even though you served her in 2007 as Ruth Smith under the application level. So there is only one customer level record per client, and an IWDS user can manually update the customer level data at any time. We'll talk about later the idea that an application is a snapshot in time, and that the application level data is supposed to be correct as of the day of the application. But let's say that that person came in 2 years ago, got married or divorced, whatever, and you need to update the information, you'll update it at this customer level here. The application level will stay the same no matter what, and we'll talk more about that later. So, customer levels where the career planner records any changes to the customer record after certification. If the person moves, has an address update, married, divorce, legal name change, new phone number, new email address, any other changes that occur after the application record is certified, you will record those changes at the customer level and not on the application level. The application level stays the same. customer level is current data. So we go into the application level, like I was saying earlier. Application levels where the client services are recorded. The client can have multiple application level records. The client could have been co-enrolled. They could have had pre-existing inquiry or exeter records. In this case, Ruth Aaron was served under Wioa and was an exeter in 2011. She came in 2015, actually applied, filled out the application, just didn't take services. And then she came back in 2019, talked to them, they filled out an inquiry record, she didn't follow up. And then in 2020, she came back and actually registered for Wioa services again. Each one of these is a separate application level record, and they're all fine. It's historical data. So each application record is a snapshot in time. This is a nice, easy way of explaining that each application should have the client's correct information at the date and time of the application. So if this client got married, she moved, had any other major changes after the 5/21/20 application date, then the updated information would be on the customer level because the application level data was accurate as of 5/1. Sometimes when a client comes into an LWIA, the career planner may forget to search for an existing IWDS record of the client, or they might not find the existing record due to a name change or a spelling error. Usually what will happen is the career planner will get an error when they try to enter the Social Security number and they try to save the new record. When this happens, local system administrators should instruct the career planner to try these 4 simple searches. I strongly recommend that these are the 4 searches that they should conduct every time they have a new client, but especially if you're having a Social Security error. These simple searches will find 99.9% of existing IWDS clients that are already in the system. These 4 searches that take approximately 2 minutes to complete. So if the career planner says they just don't have time, make time. Search number 1 is partial last name and last 4 of SSN. And the reason I do a partial last name is because the IWDS system will return anything that has at least the letters that you put in plus anything behind it. So in this case, when you're looking for THOMP, it will return Thompson with an O, Thompson with an E, Thompson with an A, Thompsonville, any variation of a name that has at least the first 5 letters, THOMP. But it will do this in conjunction with looking for this last 4 of this social because that's what you put together. So you're looking for a partial last name with the last 4 SSN. That's the first search. The second search, if you have too many results on the first one, then you add a partial first name. Usually I just put first initial. If it's a fairly common name, I'll put 3 like what I did here. So we're doing THOMP on the last name for partial, JUS on the first name for partial, plus the social. That will limit it down pretty close, but that's not always going to find the person. One of the ones that Jim Potts likes to teach in his training classes is a very simple one of using the last 4 SSN and the birth date. As long as these were entered correctly on the person, chances of having somebody with the same last 4 digits of the Social Security number and the same birth date are pretty slim. It's going to return 1, 2, maybe 3 at most. You should be able to tell whether or not that's the person you're looking for. The one that I recommend strongly, especially if you're dealing with a female client, is number 4, partial first name with the last 4 SSN. And the reason I say this is because if there was a legal name change, marriage, divorce, then you could have a client that's in IWDS with multiple applications under different last names. So if Justina here has been in IWDS with a previous maiden or married name, you're not going to find her looking for Thompson, but you might find her looking for J-U-S-T with the social, because it won't look at the last name, it's just going to look at the first name. These last two searches are definitely ones that should be ran if there's a chance that the person could have had a legal name change of some form. I actually have had a situation where one of the LWIAs off to the over by St. Louis area actually had a guy who came in, and I'm going to say this name because I've never seen it since. The guy was, his name that he had on his driver's license, his legal name had been changed to Shiny Nickel. Apparently that was his rap stage name. And they couldn't understand why Shiny Nickel's social security number was coming up as a problem. Well, that's because Shiny Nickel had been served under his previous legal name of Michael Smith or whatever it was. And I found him by doing a full social security number search through the database, through the back end, something I can do as a last ditch effort. And we discovered this name associated with the social. Caseworker went back and asked her, oh yeah, that was my name last year. So if you think the person's giving you their rap stage name, then you probably need to treat them just like you would a married or divorced client that had a legal name change. That's probably not going to come up very often unless you're in Chicago or St. Louis area, I would guess. But yeah, we had someone whose legal name had been changed to their rap stage name. So if you discover that the client has multiple client records out here because somebody's got one, you know, they came in and they've done, you know, some of these ones that don't have socials on them could be resource room ones where they came in, did some resource room stuff and left, or they sat down with one of your career planners, they got some case notes, some initial onboarding, and they left and they didn't come back. Some cases we actually end up with, you know, we could have this guy and he's got 5474 and 5473, and we know that 5473 is the real number. When this happens, we either need to delete the bad record or we request to merge them. If there are case notes or universal services on the client, I recommend just having them merged, which is something you'll have to email me to do. So as I said, if the bad record has case notes or universal services, then we want to merge that. We don't want to lose this historical data where they've been in before and they've been served. Now, if this bad record doesn't have any universal services and doesn't have any case notes, then it's probably best to go ahead and delete that because it has nothing to add to the historical data. When requesting a merge or deleting the records, the local system administrator will need to send an email to the IWDS system administrators with a screenshot of the customer records, just like this. And then you detail which one of the records has the correct customer level information that you want to keep on the merged record, or which one of these records you want to delete. So in this case, you would say, I want to merge this and I want it to go on the one with the social. Or I want it to go on the one with the social 5474. Or I want to delete the one that doesn't have the social because it doesn't have any data. And you send those to either Chris Tylen or Jim Potts, or honestly to both of us would be the best way to go. Now, there are 4 different stages to an application level record. An inquiry application level record means the application was started but not certified. An applicant level, here on the right under status, means that the application was certified but the career planner never entered any services. A registrant means that the application was certified and there was at least one service entered into the client. An exiter means the application was certified, all client services were closed, and the exit screen was completed. If the client is still in incurrent status, then the career planner should be able to go in and edit the client themselves, as none of the fields will be locked. If the incurrent record is more than a few weeks old, I recommend that your career planner just start a new record. Because if any of the data has changed, they may have moved, different phone number, work status, they got a new job, quit a job. You know, you want that application data to be current as of the day that you're certified. So if the incurrent record can't be updated to reflect the correct date, the updated date, the updated information, then they should abandon it and just start a new one. If the client's in applicant status or registrant status, then the local system administrator and the career planner are both only able to edit certain unlocked fields. The local system administrator will be able to edit more fields than the career planner can by themselves. Any locked fields will require a modification request form at this time. Now, the local system administrator is able to edit fields, delete services, and even delete eligibility certifications. On the application definition screen, the local system administrator is able to change the Illinois WorkNet Center, where the person's being served out of, or the career planner that's assigned to the client. But those are the only two drop-downs that you're able to change at this point. Everything else is going to be a locked field. If the client is not showing up on the career planner's My Customers menu in IWDS, just take a look to make sure that this Show on My Applications is marked yes. If it's marked no, then it's not going to show up under My Registrants, My Exiters, My Customers, etc., because that's been marked no. You want to, if they're having a problem, they can't find the person in their quick reference menus, then take a look here. You may just need to change that to yes. If you make a change to the contact date, the IWDS system will not let that contact date be greater than the application date that is on record for the same application level. Also on the application definition screen, the local system administrator can delete the entire application by clicking the delete button. Caution. This will delete almost everything connected to the application. All services, all certification, all client data, test data, everything will be gone, with the exception of the case notes and customer level information for the client. But the application itself will be just nuked. It's gone. You can't recover. If you do this, it's gone. You have to re-enter. Next screen. On the concurrent program screen, the local system administrator is able to change all the choices between yes and no. Keep in mind, this should reflect the concurrent programs for the client on the application date, not programs added after the date. So on this application date of 3/1/21, this person was not in any of this. Let's say the person turns around after this date and applies to gain unemployment, and they get their unemployment starting on 5/15/21. Well, that doesn't change on the application level because that's after the application date. That's something that, you know, it's after that snapshot in time. On the characteristics and barrier screen, the local system administrator is not able to change any of the fields. Any changes to these questions on this page, like let's say the they accidentally turn around and mark that the person's language of preference is French. And that means that they prefer to conduct the entire, they prefer that you would talk to them in French and not English. Well, that's going to require you to fill out an IWDS modification request form to get it changed and fixed. Or you find out that the person was a felon, has felonies on their arrest record, you didn't know at the application date, or they have misdemeanors, or the person was in foster care, especially if it's a youth that stays out of foster care. All of these changes require the modification request form. I will cover the test question when I get to that screen. So I see that, but we will get to that in just a little bit. On the employment characteristics screen, local system administrator can only change the tenure field and the dependent of a seasonal or migrant or seasonal farm worker field. Honestly, I haven't seen any records where we dealt with the migrant farmer, so I don't really have any experience with this. Tenure seems to really only apply with jobs that have tenure, like teachers. Honestly, I can't think of anything else besides teaching that would have a tenure situation. Any of the other fields on this, like let's say you on your UI status, let's say you have a mark as receiving benefits, but they had not applied for benefits as of the application date, that's going to require an IWDS modification request form. All right. Education status application screen. Local system administrator is only able to change the Pell Grant recipient or Pell Grant amount. Changes to any of the other fields on here, like if they're actually in school on the date of application, or if it turns out that they were a high school dropout and you didn't know that at the time, these are things that are going to require modification request form. Now, on the test screen, local system administrator is not able to make any changes to existing tests that have been entered. Changes to any other field on the maintain test screen or request to delete a test completely is going to require a modification request form or for you to go through the IWDS system administrators. Be aware that changing test dates and test scores can affect eligibility under basic skills deficient. So, let me get up here and take a look at this question. If the test score is entered incorrectly on the add test screen and saved, the way to correct the score information is, or to delete the test completely. Let's say you see that they've made a mistake and they entered this reading test and they accidentally put it under easy and they made it a GLE of 4 and it was supposed to be a 10. I would go ahead and have them enter the correct one, and then when you contact either the IWDS system administrator or you turn in the modification request form to the monitor, you say that this test is correct, I need this one deleted. That's the best way, I think, to handle it. The other thing you need to look at is this category. If they're putting category of other and then selecting TABE test under other for reading and math, then that test score has been entered wrong. It will not record the MSG, the gain, because it's not going to look for it because it's under the wrong category. All TABE test scores for reading and math have to be entered under category of adult basic education. So as a local system administrator, when you're looking at a file, if you're not seeing the measurable skills gain, take a look at the category. Maybe your career planner entered the category wrong under other instead of placing it under adult basic education. And you need to have those test scores entered correctly, and then we'll delete the other ones. And then it will automatically record the gain for you when the updated score is entered correctly as well. Now, let's say in this case down here at the bottom where we're looking at this one where they've got a functioning level of 5, low adult secondary education. So we got an EFL of 5, and I believe this would qualify under, I think this counts as basic skills deficient. I'm not 100% positive. I thought I put a good reference in here. I think I meant to put the 3 down here instead of the 5 with the GLE of 5. So let's say that you've got this math score here with the GLE of 5 and a scale score of 525, and they actually scored 610, and that GLE needs to change to an 8. If that score is the only reason why they're coming up as basic skills deficient, and changing it will make it so that that person is no longer basic skills deficient, that's something you need to look at when you're filling out the modification request form. Because what will have to happen is we may have to remove the basic skills deficient Wioa eligibility, and you may have to make sure that you have just a low income or a regular career level certification in there before we remove the basic skills deficient eligibility. So that's one of those things where we're going to look at it when we make the change, because the monitors are supposed to catch that, and if they don't, when they submit to the IWDS system administrators, Jim Potts and I look for this. And if we catch it, then we're going to tell the monitor, hey, if I change this, then it changes the eligibility. And then the monitor is going to come back to you guys and say, hey, we need to make adjustments because this test change, which has to be made, is going to change your eligibility. So, like I said, everything's fluid. You just, once you get in a rhythm and you get used to this, it'll become second nature to even think about that when you're making that kind of change on the test screen. On the public assistance screen, the local system administrator is only able to change the most recent date referred to other federal state assistance field down at the bottom. Changes to any other field on this screen, whether it be transitional assistance, refugee help, Social Security income, Social Security disability income, whether or not they were on food stamps, TANF, the DHS case number, the months receiving TANF prior to 60 months, all of those changes could affect eligibility for low income, which is why they're locked. So it's going to come to us, hey, this person, they're marked SSDI and it needs to be no. Well, if that SSDI equals yes is the only reason the person was certified low income, then that's going to change the eligibility and we're going to have to remove that certification. Or in this, let's say in this case, this person was supposed to be on Social Security disability and they weren't marked it, and now they're eligible for low income, then you're going to be able to go back onto the eligibility screen and you're going to be able to recertify under the low income because now you're able to qualify for it. Family characteristics screen. And then by association, the list family screen that comes out of it. The local system administrator is not able to change any of these fields. So if we've got a situation here where it's a family size of 2, and we've got, in this case, Bobby Fietti, her daughter Giada, and Giada is not 11, she's 8. Well, then you need to contact IWDS with the IWDS modification form to have that age changed. Or if she's not 11 and she's 18 and she's actually not dependent anymore and has her own income, then we need to make those changes. That will require a system modification form. Or they forgot to include a child and we need to add another kid in here. And we've got, Hunter that needs to be added, a son that was 7 that wasn't in there at the time. These are things that are all going to require a modification request form. The income calculation screen. The local system administrator is not able to change any of these fields. Any changes to this screen, whether it be reporting self-employed wages, unemployment benefits, that all needs to be submitted with the IWDS modification request form. Be aware that any changes to these income fields could affect eligibility when it comes to low income, when it comes to, making sure that we have the correct numbers in here and that everything's entered properly and it matches up with Ibiz and matches up with the information reported. That's obviously we want to make sure we're reporting the right thing. And if it changes the eligibility, then we'll just have to make adjustments to see what we can do here. If something happens where they're no longer eligible as low income, then you're just going to have to treat them under regular Wioa. Just like if the test score changes and they're no longer basic skills deficient, well, you no longer have that eligibility area, so you can't do them under 1A BSD career. You're going to have to do it under 1A regular career. Dislocated worker characteristic screen. The only thing you're able to change is whether or not the person is a displaced homemaker and the 4 DWG disaster fields. Displaced homemaker, that's a situation of where the person is stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home dad, the spouse was laid off, and now that's affecting the homemaker. Jim Potts covers this more in his training, but what I'm saying is this is not a situation of where somebody just decided to move. There has to be something that displaced them. We had an issue 5 or 6 years ago where somebody was trying to say that these people were displaced homemakers because they moved from one city to another. They didn't move for employment reasons. They just moved. The same case manager also tried to say that the person fired themselves from their self-employment. Think about that for a second. They fired themselves from their self-employment. Yeah, it took me a while to figure out just exactly what the career planner was trying to do with that one. Anyway, long story short, any changes to these other screens, other fields on the screen, have to be filled out in an IWDS modification request form. Just make sure your career planner understands that, when they're filling out these applications, they need to take their time and do it right the first time. Yeah, that's the one takeaway on this, that if you got somebody who's constantly coming to you, they've always got corrections that need to be made, they need to slow down. The Wioa training criteria screen. This is one where you can change all the fields on here. And this is where it answers, who was an assessment done to the client? Who completed it? Was there an IEP? Who completed it? Do they meet the qualifications for a selected training program? This question is as of the application date. It's not meant to change 6 months from now when they've got, some college courses under their belt that you paid for. This is as of that date. Selected training program is in demand. Yes or no on that date. Other grant sources unavailable on that date. Generally, this is one of the screens that, I'll be honest with you, very rarely do you ever make corrections to it because generally you got it right the first time. Now, looking at the eligibility determination screen. Local system administrator is able to add new title program eligibility and certify it. They can also delete previously certified title program eligibility. So, for example, going back to what we were talking about, let's say you guys originally had this person only registered under basic skills deficient career services because they had a GLE of 3 on their math score. Well, it turns out that GLE of 3 was supposed to be a GLE of 10. And they're really not basic skills deficient once you get that corrected. You can go in and recertify the eligibility determination date. Just type in the same date as the application date again. It'll come up. You fill in the documentation for adult 1A career services. You go to certify it just like you would at the beginning. Make sure the dates are still matching application date. And now you've got 1A career services and 1A basic skills deficient career services. Now you know that you're going to have the basic skills deficient services go away when you make the corrections of the test scores. So you can click right here on the certification date, and then you go in here and you can delete it as a local system administrator. However, you should be very careful to make sure that any related services are deleted before deleting a certification, especially if you're switching somebody from 1A to 1D, 1D to 1N, etc. If you're getting rid of the 1A completely and putting them in 1D because you realize they actually qualified under dislocated worker instead of adult, that's great. Go ahead and enter the 1D and get them certified and everything in there. But you have to go delete all of the 1A case note, career management, career planning, occupational, any of the services you did under 1A have to be deleted before you delete that 1A certification. I recommend that if it's a case like that where you're moving everything from 1A to 1D or 1D to 1A, whatever, go ahead and duplicate everything in the go ahead and add the new certification first. Go duplicate all the services, delete the services that you're no longer needing, and then go remove the 1A. Luckily, this is not something that happens very often. 1 or 2 a year, maybe, that I have to help with. So this is something that you guys can do on your own, but don't be afraid to ask for help. That's what Jim and I are here for. Contact information. Now, this is in the application level. All of these fields are locked, just like they're supposed to be, because they're supposed to be locked as of the application date. Any changes to this screen, let's say that they were supposed to be 700 East Monroe or they're apartment 10C, and they've got proof that this was as of the date of the application, and we need to change that. That's when you fill out the IWDS modification request form. You can prove that those changes need to be made because they actually were not correct as of the application date. Now, if they made changes after the date, application date's 3/1/21, on 6/30 of 22, Bobby Fiatti moved into a new apartment on West Washington. That goes back to the very first screens where we put that on the customer level, because that is not something that happened on the application date. It happened after the application date. Goes back to that snapshot in time we talked about. That's something that you can repeat over and over again to your career planners. Treat the application level as a snapshot in time. So, verify that any changes you want to try to turn in were accurate as of the application date. If they were not accurate, if this information is accurate on the application date and it changed after that, you have to go make those changes at the customer level. Now, on the additional contacts screen, the local system administrator is able to add new contacts, and you're also able to go into any existing contacts and make any changes to all the data here. But you still will have to have the red starred thing. So, like, you can't get rid of the phone number and try to save the record. It's not going to let you do that. You have to have a phone number one way or the other. But if now you can't get a hold of Bobby Fiatti, You call Guy Flay, and Guy Flay tells you, hey, why don't you email me next time? Well, you can go ahead and add Guy Flay's email address in here under the contact information, and that's great. Or if it turns out that you find out that Guy Flay isn't a friend, it's her brother. Well, you can change what the relationship is from friend to brother or father or whatever the relationship is. You could add the address, you can add the zip code, city, state, email address. You can put comments in here. Contact, the contact was not helpful, says they haven't spoken to client in over 2 years. You could put that in there. Just whatever you need to do, the local system administrator is able to make changes by either adding new contacts or making changes to existing contacts. On the private information screen, local system administrator is able to change the race, ethnicity, individual with a disability, category of disability, and all of the new Wioa fields at the bottom. Any other fields on this screen will require an IWDS modification request form. However, local system administrator should verify that any changes being made to this screen were accurate as of the application date. So, for example, if Bobby Fiatti ends up being disabled after the application date, she has a car accident, stroke, something happens, accident, falls off a ladder, COVID-related breathing issues. You won't make the change here if that change to the disability status happened after the application date. You'll do that under the private information screen on the customer level. However, if it turns out that on the application date, Bobby Fiatti actually had a learning disability and has, for example, dyslexia, and didn't tell you at the time of intake, but you have proof that they had this learning disability at the time of the application, then you go ahead and change it, which can change the eligibility. Now, let's say that we have an issue here under selective service. Those issues you're going to have to work with either the IWDS system administrator or the Wioa, the IWDS modification request form through the monitor. Things involving selective service, I will be honest with you, I can help you. Jim Potts is much more experienced about things involving military and selective service than I am. I jokingly refer to us as the nuts and the bolts. We're both necessary to make the system work, but we both do it in different ways. He has his strengths, I have mine. If, and this is going to be one where I'm just going to kind of glaze over it, and I'm just going to give you the official response from Illinois Department of, or the Federal Department of Labor. We have changed, I believe in IWDS, that the gender screen has been changed to gender at birth. A person born male is still required to file selective service, as far as I know, under current Department of Labor information. Waivers can be had, things can be done. That's one of those things where if you have a situation involving that, I recommend that you email Jim Potts. He's much more experienced handling that. CC me, so I'm involved, because I like to learn when trying to keep up with some of the things. But that gender is now gender at birth, and that is the way DOL wants us to handle it. If the person is coming in and they're wanting to be identified under a different name, the problem is that the name on the application and the name has to be their legal name on the application date. So in this case, if Bobby Fietti wanted to become Bobby with a Y Scott and say wants to identify as male, those, if that's a legal name change that they went down to the courthouse and did, then yes, you can enter that on the customer level. But that gender at birth won't change. However, if they are just wanting to be identified as this other name and it's not a legal name change, case note it, but don't change the record. The record is the legal name. What name is on their driver's license, what name is on their tax return, what name is on all of their legal documents. That's the name that needs to be on the customer level, and the legal name at the time of application needs to be the name that's in the rest of the application. This is a touchy field, touchy subject. No opinions are being made one way or the other. I'm just telling you this is how DOL has instructed us to handle this. Okay. Making corrections to the Veterans Information Screen. Local system administrator is not able to change any of these fields after certification. Any changes to the fields on the screen will require an IWDS modification request form and documentation. For example, if they didn't enter their military and you've got a DD-214 that shows they were, then we're going to need that documentation to prove the change. So verify that any of the changes to the screen are accurate as of the application date before you submit the IWDS modification change request form. Any changes after the application date, whether they left military service, entered military service, etc., need to be made to the Veterans Information Screen on the customer level. List work history. Now, from this basic page, you're not going to be able to add any new records, but you can click on the employer record to make changes to the record. The exception is any job associated with the Wioa dislocated worker eligibility criteria cannot be updated by the local system administrator at the application level. It will be locked and will require a request for modification form submission to make the changes. But in this case, Bobby Fietti works at Mellow Cream Donuts, which is a wonderful donut company here in Springfield, Illinois. If you haven't had it, you're missing out. Move on in here to the edit job. As long as it's not the one that, as I said, was their dislocated worker eligibility criteria, you will be able to make changes to all the screens available here. Unfortunately, including dislocation. You can make one from no to yes, primary occupation from yes to no, layoff reason, last day, etc. Just make sure any changes that you're doing on the application level were accurate as of the application date. What will happen is any changes that occurred after the application date, go to the list work history screen on the customer level and make your changes there. Any changes for jobs associated with dislocated worker eligibility will need to be filled out with an IWDS modification change request form, and those changes won't transfer over since the job at the application level had that eligibility criteria locked. Now, there are exit screens and job at exit and entering a job at exit. Those are different things that you cover under regular Wioa training with Jim Potts. I'm only talking about what screens we can make corrections to, and that's why I'm not discussing employment at exit or any of the other things like that. Now, one of the things I am going to mention is that if a job is listed here in all capital letters, then it probably came 99.9% likely it came over through data sharing with IDES and was not entered by your staff. And if any changes need to be made to that information, you probably need to contact IWDS and let them know, hey, my guy didn't work at Caterpillar. He lives in Springfield, not Decatur. So somebody turned something in using his social, and that's not him. Or Sears comes across. Well, Sears closed in 2019, and you guys have data saying he was employed with Sears through 2021. IWDS, you guys have got the wrong last day employed. So the ones that are all capital letters, even if we make changes to them on IWDS, we're still getting the data from IWDS, and it's going to get rewritten again. So any of those ones that come across through the data sharing with IWDS, you're going to have to get corrected at IWDS. So looking at the services screens, local system administrator needs to click on the individual service records to see whether or not you're able to make changes. So in this case, we're going to click on development of an IEP service. In this particular service, you're able to change the grant number, the provider, the weekly hours, and the comment field. A change to anything else, start date, end date, current status, what title, what service level, the activity itself, you're going to have to fill out an IWDS modification request form. The other option, if there's a bunch of things wrong on here, it may just be easier to delete the service and have the case manager, career planner, re-enter the service. And then you can just go ahead and delete it and move on. Different services have different fields open and closed. So depending on what you can and can't change will be determined by clicking on the different service itself. If the start date of the service is wrong, you will need to delete this service, because even the IWDS system administrators like me and Jim, we can't change the start date. So I would have them enter the correct data and then go delete the bad one. List case note screen. Local system administrator needs to click on the individual case note that you want to update. Local system administrators cannot delete case notes. So if you have a case note that they put the case notes from client A on client B, then yeah, you're going to need to fill out a request form or contact the IWDS system administrator, and we're going to have to go in and delete those for you. But if it's a situation of where you need to change the case note, you can change the program, whether it's Wioa or Trade, or it used, once upon a time we had Adams. Who knows? Maybe we'll have another program someday. You can change the note category. You can change whether or not the note's confidential. You can change the note subject, and you can change the case note itself. So if the career planner entered the wrong information with the right date, you could just correct the case note. But you're not able to change the staff name. That comes automatically from the person who created the case note. You can't change the contact date. That's saved when they create the case note. And if either of those fields need changed, either the local system administrator needs to delete the record and re-enter the case note. Easiest that way. Just have them enter a new one, delete the bad one. Having us try to make system modification changes to a case note, honestly, I don't necessarily know. I think it would take us longer to make a correction to it than it would be for you to have the career planner enter the case note the right way and for you to just delete the old one. I honestly think it would be half, if not a third of the time. Any case notes needing deleted get submitted with an IWDS modification request form, and we just go in, click, and remove. Now, when submitting the modification request forms, the OET monitoring staff The LWIAs are separated into 3 distinct regions. You have Northern Region, which has LWIAs 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 10, and 11. Central, which has 4, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 23. And Southern, which has 22, 24, 25, 26. Current version of the IWDS modification form is reflected next to the right. You can request a copy of this from your OET monitoring staff. Local system administrator fills this out, emails the form and supporting documentation for the change